If you have ever read a Warhammer 40k book, hell, if you've ever watched a Warhammer 40k lore video, you'll no doubt have heard the following words.
For more than 100 centuries, the Emperor has sat immobile on the golden throne of Earth. He is the master of mankind. By the might of his inexhaustible armies, 1,000,000 worlds stand against the dark. Yet, he is a rotting carcass, the carrion lord of the Imperium, held in life by marvels from the dark age of technology, and the 1,000 souls sacrificed each day so that his may continue to burn.
Those are some of the most famous words in all of Warhammer. Hell, they're some of the most famous words in all of science fiction, and yet they're not actually correct. You see, in modern Warhammer 40k, we know quite a lot about the Golden Throne, and a lot of it has come from one series, the Leagues of Terra series by Chris Raitt. To sum up a lot of the story, in the final book we discover that the Fabricator General of Mars, one of the High Lords of Terra, the person who is in charge of the planet of Mars and therefore in effect arming significant parts of the Imperium, has been taking part in a conspiracy. He is tracked down by some custodians and some inquisitors and their servants, and they begin to confront him as to what he's been doing all this time. They actually confront him in the Webway of all places, because this conspiracy has been involving the Drukhari, a dreadful Xenos race whom the Imperium would never normally want to work with. Furthermore, talking to him is no easy feat. He can only converse with others through this avatar, which is said to look like a dwarf. However, ultimately, the custodians, the inquisitors, they do get to him and they do ask him what is going on, and he explains that although he's done arguably terrible things, he's done them all for a very important reason, and that reason is because he's trying to save the Golden Throne.
I will not insult your intelligence by asking how you discovered this scheme, or to what level of detail you are aware of its operations. I shall assume that you understand why I am here in this place. I shall assume that you do not understand the primary set of concerns that were the genesis of the mission. I shall enlighten you in full now, and conclude with the unanswerable case for action. Then you can judge what counts as heresy, and what does not. The hololiths firmed up further, tracing out some kind of astonishingly complex three-dimensional mechanism lit internally with false light sources and translucencies. Krau's first impression was that it was the interior of a city, a cross-section of a hive sphere with all its many thousands of levels and internal machinery. The viewpoint zoomed in steadily, delving deep through system after system. It quickly became hard to follow, let alone interpret, an unfolding world of colossal and impenetrable detail, fused and melded and augmented until the mind itself began to rebel against the abundance of information. This is the Golden Throne, the dwarf said. Its outer reaches less than 1 kilometer below ground. Most of what you are seeing here was put in place around 4,000 years ago, during the tenure of Weeksot. It counts as among the more recent of the major additions. As you can see, the bulk of these regions are composed of supplementary energy coils coupled to psychically resonant channelers. Energy coils? Holy terror, those things were vast. Crowl had been shown the reactors at the base of a big hive spire once and had been impressed, but these things, if the projections were to be believed, were on another scale entirely. The hololiths kept on zooming in, accelerating now, hurtling through the layers. If you lost your focus, you could easily imagine that you were physically lost inside the maze of dizzyingly unfolding layers, caught in a race to the heart of it and buried deep beyond any possible help. These are the pre-apostrophe strata, Raskian intoned. Some of the more extensive works since Foundation. Again, observe the energy ducts. The lesson you will be taking, power requirements of all kinds, have increased exponentially since the throne's creation. Crowl blinked hard, feeling his eyes watering.
Every so often, he caught sight of gantries, tunnels, bridges, all flying by, and only then could he start to put a scale on what he was seeing. The style of construction was changing now, getting older, stranger, involving terraces of devices he had no name for.
This is now close to what your people, Custodian, think of the throne room proper, though still far from the core chamber. We are within 2 millennia of its foundation. Very few of the systems here are replicable in this era, and their origins are mostly lost, though integrity of function remains high.
The viewpoint bored down. It hadn't slowed yet, and the microscopic level of detail kept flying by. Then, slowly, gradually, the pace started to slow.
Now we near the heart of it. This is, according to the ancient scrolls, the limit of the original machine specification. We are a long way below ground now, far beyond the reach of the standard augurs, though of course nominal surface level has risen considerably since the inception of these works. The core chamber itself is within a kilometer of this location.
The viewpoint finally ground to a halt. The hololiths displayed a static image of the throne's innards. Very little of what Crowl was seeing made any kind of sense to him. Some of the clusters might have been junctions for huge energy cables. Other sections looked like heat exchangers, but it was a dense mess, a hyper-concentrated accretion of different tech bundles and modules, all interconnected through a cat's cradle of wires, side bridges, and conductors. None of it looked like Imperial technology. Not in the slightest. It was a melange, a tech maelstrom, a crunched-together collision of 1,000 different chassis styles, object phenotypes, and machine schemata.
This region,
the dwarf said,
has a name. It is called the Areopia Junction. The significance of the term has been lost. Its core function, however, is broadly understood. The bulk of the devices in this region enable the throne, by which I now mean the seat itself, the prime interface, to tolerate the imposition of an occupant of mortal dimension and physical limitations. If these mechanisms were to fail, that function would cease, and the occupant, any occupant of such a nature, would be unable to retain contact with the interface.
"What do you mean, mortal?" asked Zyges, the tone of suspicious outrage giving away the real meat of the query.
Please do not impose your religious convictions on this discussion, Inquisitor,
the dwarf said calmly.
Much of what I say now will offend you. I ask that you refrain from comment until I have completed the survey.
As the Fabricator General spoke, a small part of the hololith was illuminated. Crowl had no idea of the scale. The lit section might have been a few meters across, or maybe 100, or maybe a kilometer.
This is a component of the junction. You may recognize the style of the insertion. It is non-metallic in construction, immensely strong, resistant to most forms of molding and recasting. It is psychically charged and forms an integral part of the region's material function.
The viewpoint moved a little closer, zeroing in on the illumination component.
Observe the markings on the casing here.
The markings were runes. Not Gothic runes, not even archaic Terran.
Impossible,
said Spinoza.
On the contrary,
said the dwarf.
The deeper one delves, the more inscriptions one finds. Some are of unknown provenance. Some are beyond our ability to pass. The throne itself, the physical object that forms the core of the entire machine, is certainly not of human origin. Hence the need, we hypothesize, for a subsystem to mediate between it and the occupant.
By then, both Zyges and Spinoza were becoming outraged, having to work to hold in their fury, as if a foul and offensive jest were being played at their expense. The custodians remained impassive. Crowl, though, felt a sudden spark of excitement, a thrill of recognition, of realization, of confirmation. "Of course," he said out loud, without intending to. The dwarf ignored him.
We are unable to remedy the faults in the system. It is failing, becoming less efficient despite the increase in power being fed into the greater machine, and no investigation we have conducted has produced a remedy.
How long have you been investigating this? Asked Navadaran.
537 years, Standard Terran. We are no nearer to a solution than we were at the outset. In the meantime, the component continues to degrade. We estimate total failure within a century or two, in the best case, within a decade, in the worst case.
The dwarf let that sink in. No one spoke for a while. The hololith glittered before them.
And if it fails?
The custodian asked.
What then?
The dwarf did not reply immediately, even for a creature that had spent a lifetime purging emotion from itself. Saying the actual words seemed difficult.
The end,
it said eventually, its voice as empty as the frigid gulf between the stars.
The end of everything.
And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. There is so much in that passage to unwrap. Some of the things that we find out from Uudi Araskian, who is the Fabricator General of Mars, I don't think I mentioned that earlier, are confirmations of things that we thought we knew for a long time within the setting, and some of the things that he introduces are basically brand new. So as I say, you know, if you look at any Warhammer 40k novel, hell, if you watch any YouTube video, you check any wiki, I guarantee you it will say that the Emperor is kept alive by technology from the Dark Age. But that's actually not true. We have it in writing now from the man who knows above everyone else. Chris Ray, just joking, the Fabricator General of Mars. The core components of the throne are Xenos in origin, and that makes a lot more sense for the setting, because of course, outside of the Emperor, basically nobody knows how to fix this thing, how to improve it. Or so it would seem, because Games Workshop or Black Library are going to have to come up with somebody to fix this throne at some point in the future, at least postpone its inevitable degradation, because as he points out in that passage, the Golden Throne may have a couple of 100 years left, it may only have decades left, and from that point, the timelines get a bit fuzzy because Games Workshop retconned a lot of Rabute Gilliman's story, but the best part of a century has likely passed by this point. So we've used up already about half the time of the Golden Throne. So it's a little bit scary. Someone's going to have to fix it. And so I thought it would be a really fun thing today to talk about who could fix the throne. The obvious suggestion is that Uudi Araskian, he might be able to, in some way, understand some new Xenos technology, make a new pact, make a new deal. However, after that point in the story, things sort of go to hell. So eventually, and I've talked about this in a video before, I'll link that in the description later. The Inquisitor Erasmus Crowell, cut a long story short, he has been slowly turning into one of the Drukhari, and he discovers that the Drukhari are trying to make a golden throne of their own, and the reason they've made this deal with the Imperium is so that they can get access to some of the Emperor's genetic material so that they can clone their own version of the Emperor to power their version of the Golden Throne, which they need to stop demonic incursions into the Dark City of Commorragh. So when he finds this out, this is such an abomination, not only to the Inquisitors, but even the Custodians. So the Custodians start opening fire. All of a sudden, the Drukhari start springing out of the ground. Everything goes to hell. The deal does not go through. Uudi Araskian's plan fails. We do know that most of the Imperials in that story die. We don't find out exactly what happens to Raskian, but as I said, talking to him is very weird. He has to communicate through this dwarf because he's had so many augmentations. He's basically just a building at this point in time, and so he can't exactly run away. So if he's alive because the Drukhari have let him live, which seems unlikely, the kind of thing that they do. Additionally, like, I've been looking in Warhammer 40k books that have come out after this one for any confirmation that Raskian survives. So, for example, Morven Val, she has a novel, and there is reference to a Fabricator General, but Raskian's name is not mentioned. In Belisarius Cool's novel, Gene Father with Fabius Bile, there is a reference to Raskian and Cool's kind of rivalry with him and how Raskian thinks Cool wants to take over Mars, and he says this isn't true, but it's not actually shown that Raskian's still alive at that point in time, and again, the timelines are a bit fuzzy, so Games Workshop have yet to commit to the idea that Raskian survived this encounter with the Drukhari. I don't think it's going to be very likely, and I think that leads us into some pretty great talking points, because now we can start discussing who could possibly save the Golden Throne. Perturabo sounds like one of the only people that could fix it. Vulkan, if he understood it, has the skill, but I don't think he could figure it out. But Perty has the ability to understand everything. I get where you're coming from, to be fair. But when we're talking about who could save the Golden Throne, we have to think about a few separate things. We have to think about whether they have the ability to save the Golden Throne, the understanding, whether they have the inclination, whether they would want to save the Emperor of Mankind. A lot of the traitors, of course, believe it or not, do not like the Emperor. So to start off, we use an example. So the obvious answer is, of course, Terrence Howard, American actor, one of the smartest people on the planet. He obviously has the intelligence to save the Golden Throne. The only downside with this theory is that he, of course, might actually just be the Emperor of Mankind. So not entirely sure that would hold up. But certainly he's a good example of somebody in the setting that could, in theory, save the Golden Throne. So I was having to think about this. Who would be a good option? And I thought I'd just bound around some ideas, see what you guys think. So, who have we got first on the list? Other than Terrence Howard, we have Vulkan, the Primarch of the Salamanders. And most people's mind will jump towards Vulkan, right? And the reason for this is for obvious reasons. Just like Terrence Howard, he is a genius. He is actually the last artisan of the Emperor's loyalist sons. Ferrus Manus was also kind of like a technical genius. All of the Primarchs are geniuses, but Vulkan is really at another level, especially when it comes to technology. So there's a bunch of things we can talk about here from the lore. Vulkan is a really good character, despite some questionable novels. But like, yeah, for example, he takes some schematics from Perturabo, I remember, and he creates a perpetual motion engine. So he literally just kind of breaks the laws of physics for fun, and he just does that because, according to Perturabo, Vulkan's love of technology exceeds everything else, and Perturabo loves technology. So that shows if Perturabo thinks you're impressive at tech, you're pretty impressive. Additionally, when Vulkan is captured by Conrad Kurz and put into this labyrinth during the book Vulkan Lives, he gets to his hammer, Dawnbringer, and his hammer has a teleport beacon in it. And Kurz knows about this, and he mocks Vulkan, and he says, "Ha ha ha! You think you're going to get out because you've got a teleporter in your hammer, but I've put teleport blockers in this area, so you're never going to get out, haha." And then Vulkan, it's a very epic line where he says, that's really funny, Kurz, but you're forgetting it's still a hammer. And then he beats 7 hells out of his brother, and justifiably, I think we can all agree. And I think that kind of shows you the level of Vulkan's genius, because his tech is so far above the Night Lords and presumably the Iron Warriors, because this is some Iron Warriors tech, that his tech just supersedes whatever their tech does. So he is a true genius. Additionally, Dawnbreaker in and of itself is super powerful. So Dawnbringer is outright said by Vulkan, and he does know his stuff, to be the most powerful weapon out of all of the Primarch weapons, and he created it originally for Horus Lupercal, and this weapon is nuts. So like it's basically Mjolnir from the Avengers. So like he can pull it towards himself through the air. There's an ability where he turns it on at one point and no one else can pick up the hammer once he puts it down. He is like the Thor of the Primarchs, really. So it's truly an impressive weapon, and he actually, not only is he intelligent in terms of his tech, but it's interesting to know that this weapon, he doesn't give it to Horus because Vulkan is one of the only Primarchs to realize that something's not right about Horus. And so, because when he informs Horus about the way Kurz is being a madman, Horus doesn't really seem to respond, and he doesn't really seem to take it seriously. So Vulkan doesn't give Horus this weapon because he can see something's wrong. So he clearly has this understanding. And to round things off, Vulkan does have a particular connection with the Golden Throne. So one of Vulkan's major storylines in the Heresy is to craft something called the Talisman of Seven Hammers, and this is connected to the Golden Throne. It's actually like a self-destruct button. So the idea was one of Vulkan's jobs during the Siege of Terra, well, his main job is to decide whether or not to destroy the planet, because if it looks like Horus is definitely going to win, the Emperor would want Vulkan just to destroy the planet and deny chaos, a true victory, as it were. Thankfully, I mean, it nearly comes to that, but thankfully it doesn't come to that. So his understanding of the Golden Throne is likely built into him. So a really important thing to note about the crafting the Talisman of Seven Hammers is in the book, when he's making it, he sort of doesn't really know what it is. He's just able to make it, and then he creates this incredible device. It's a bit like warp magic-y as well. It's able to permanently kill a great unclean one. It's a bit of a nuts device. So he definitely has some massive technological gifts. I certainly think Vulkan is probably the most valuable Primarch, in my opinion, to return. These technological marvels he can create are massive. And in fact, you might be familiar with the artifacts of Vulkan. When he and Tekel destroy all of these artifacts, one of them is basically just like a cool flamer. Like, it's said that some of them are so powerful, Vulkan feels like he has to destroy them, because if any of them found their way into the hands of the traitors, then it might guarantee a Horus victory. That's how strong some of these weapons are, in theory, or just devices. So Vulkan, very, very powerful dude. Don't mess with him. Eldrad Ulthuan, he was the personal friend of the Emperor, and the Eldar might know how to fix the Golden Throne, since it might be Old One's technology. Yes, it's not addressed. Good question. It's not addressed in the novel why the Imperium works with the Drukhari as opposed to the Craft Welders, right? They're able to contact the Drukhari. That's fine, because there's a webway gate on Luna. But, the Imperium... It's a bit better now, but the Imperium has always had sort of loose alliances with craft worlds, and in theory, there's an Inquisitor who's involved as well. But the High Lords of Terra could have exploited one of these relationships and maybe brought some craft worlders to Terra. One of the Harlequins, very famously, has a nice jostle towards the throne room at one point during the Beast Arises series. In theory, they could have pushed this relationship. Maybe it was just easier for them to get in contact with the Drukhari, but they don't really like any of the Xenos. Maybe they just don't see a difference. Maybe they're just all Xenos to them, all filth, and that's it. But yeah, in theory, the Craft Welders could do. Eldrad Ulthuan, as Chris says, does have a relationship with the Emperor, according to Eldrad. He says this to Gilliman. And certainly there's a bit where in Genefather, where they go to this area that's said to be like a meeting ground between the old human and Eldar empires, because they, of course, coexisted for quite a long period of time. And so humanity and the Eldar used to have a good relationship. And in theory, could do again? I don't know. So there's definitely something in that. Whether they have the ability to fix the Golden Throne, we don't know. Certainly, when you hear runes in that passage, you're thinking that this is Eldar tech or Old Ones tech, and so having somebody from the Eldar or the Old Ones involved would be good. Vulkan isn't a member of the Eldar race. However, he was famously very close to an Eldar child at one point during the Great Crusade. So no doubt he knows a little bit. JD, thank you for the super chat. I'm convinced Kegarak will play a role in saving the Emperor. I mean, bringing the Harlequins into this would be very beneficial, because the Harlequins have got access to the Black Library, which is basically the greatest repository of knowledge in the entire setting. So it would be massive to have that as an ally. And the Harlequins are kind of peak mysterious. We know that they work with the Drukhari and the Craft Welders. They have worked with Cypher, of all people. So Kegarak has clearly got some plans, but yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. But yeah, it's tough to really put a predictor on, because the Harlequins are involved in just nuts plot lines whenever they come up. So who knows? Lewis, thank you for the super chat. 2 thrones so the Emperor can afford a better Wi-Fi. Yes, I mean, one of the things about that passage that I played you at the start that I think is quite interesting is where it talks about how the Emperor couldn't be sustained. And I know I've talked about this many times on the channel, but again, in theory, it's not clear to me the degree to which that's true, because I mean, some of the Emperor would survive even if you turned off the Golden Throne. You'd lose Terra, you'd lose a lot of the Imperium. but maybe you'd keep the best part of the Emperor. Maybe you'd keep the Star Child. Maybe you'd keep this part of the Emperor's soul that's able to create Imperial Saints. And maybe the Imperium would stand a chance. I don't know. It's fun to speculate about, but we just don't really know. Strange that the Inari are so silent. I mean, yeah, Guilliman getting the Inari involved would make a lot of sense. They have got death magic, basically, and the Emperor is in a state of undeath. So the Inari would be a pretty relevant faction to bring in right now. But let me move ahead. So who else was I going to mention? There we go. Oh, yeah, this is a fun one. I definitely wanted to talk about these guys. Let's talk about the Leagues of Votann, because they are, of course, kind of the big new, I was going to say Imperium, but like human faction, human-ish faction within the setting. And I think there's an interesting question here as to whether the kin would have the scientific understanding or development to at least potentially fix the Golden Throne. So let me make my case. And my case is going to be connected to the main Votann book that's come out so far. So they've appeared in a few novels. So some of these, admittedly, might point the other way. So we have them appearing in a short story called 1 Million Years, where they fight against the Necrons, and the Necrons' tech is significantly above the kin's tech. There's a very funny part where one of the kin is just obliterated by a cryptek. It's turned to ash, basically. So it kind of shows you their difference in technological levels, but that's to be expected. Of course, we'd expect the Necrons to be much above. Then in the Dawn of Fire series, we do see them kind of strip a Blackstone fortress for parts, and the crude nature in which they do this does suggest that maybe their understanding of technology is significantly below the understanding of whoever created the Blackstone fortresses, which is not a good sign. But things get a lot more interesting in the kin's latest novel called The High Carl, because in that novel, they discover the location of, literally, according to them, the most valuable artifact in the galaxy. One of the original Votann, which is a massive deal. So this is a big plot line for them going forwards. And what they can do, if they can find this Votann will have STC components. This Votann will have knowledge from when humanity used to work with the Eldar. In theory, this Votann, or some of the Votann, could give the kin themselves the knowledge needed if they brokered an alliance with the Imperium to fix the Golden Throne. That's my case. That's the best case I can make for them. At the moment, I'll be honest, I think it's probably above their technology. I kind of think of them, I was looking in the codex to see if there's any direct comparisons drawn, because they've only really had one codex, and there's not really, but I'd imagine them around Tau tech level. They've got Tau tech, they've got Tau comparable tech. So certainly, they're willing to develop more than the Imperium, and they do kind of look down on the Mechanicus and joke about how they kind of worship toasters and that kind of thing. Which is and they joke about how they worship pigeons. That's quite funny. They talk about the holy pigeon that the Imperium do, which is very funny to me. Okay. Perfect. All right. If anybody wants to ask me a question in chat, put a request in now. Hey, Amber King, good to have you here, bud. I hope you're doing well. Hey, Sandman. Besides Vulkan, if we are evening out the playfield, assuming one more Chaos Primarch in the mix, who would you say who's the most important loyalist to get? Yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, because with the Khan, for example, the Khan is clearly on some mysterious shit. Like the Khan's intelligence suggests that him kind of crossing over into the webway would have been a deliberate thing, and he wasn't just kind of tricked in this measure, and so he went into the webway for a reason. And so the mind starts thinking about hunting down stuff in Comorra, connecting with the Harlequins, all this kind of fun stuff that I think we want to see the Khan do. There's a theory that he kind of just got, within the White Scars, I should say, there's a theory that he kind of just got bored of fighting and just kind of left the Imperium, which some people have in the White Scars, and you're not allowed to have it. If you have that theory, the chaplain will come over and bonk you on the head. But it is a suggested theory, so it might be that, but you can't help but think maybe he's working with the Harlequins or something and doing something nuts, which would make him incredibly valuable to the entire setting. But of the lore that we have, I kind of got to go with Corvus Corax. His understanding of the warp makes him a kind of unique asset amongst the Primarchs, because his ability to sort of, I don't really have another way of phrasing it, like unlock these kind of abilities, because he doesn't like transform into a demon Primarch. It's a bit of a misnomer. He kind of understands more about what it means to be a Primarch. He understands more about what they always were. That's what he says. And so he kind of understands the aspects of what Primarchs are. And so he could, in theory, if he returned, he could sort of teach Guilliman and the Lion how to sort of use these gifts. And it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Corvus Corax return and he teaches Guilliman psychic powers and other nut stuff. But your question does lead me on to the next point, and this was inevitably going to come up in this topic, but as we've got a good segue here, let's go to it. So the next option, of course, for who could be in the running to fix the Golden Throne, I gotta go with my boy. Oh, hang on, no, I gotta go with my boy Constantin Valdor, the Captain General of the Custodians, otherwise known as the King in Yellow. And the reason I say that's a segue is because connected to Constantin Valdor's story is, of course, Leman Russ, in theory. So there's a story called Two Metaphysical Blades, which is a bit old now. It might be a little bit outdated, but I think it's fun Warhammer lore. And in that, the Emperor talks about how Constantin Valdor and Leman Russ are sort of opposites, really. They get opposite spears. And it was always kind of suggested in Warhammer, well, I say always, it was sometimes suggested in Warhammer 40K lore that Constantin Valdor and Leman Russ left the Imperium together. And they left searching for something called Tree of Life. And the Tree of Life, saving the Emperor, could be in the realm of fixing the Golden Throne. Now, whilst I don't think Valdor and Russ are still working together, and I've spoken about that quite a lot before, I do think it's possible that one of Valdor's aims might well be to fix the Golden Throne. And the reason I say that, there's a couple of pieces in the King in Yellow story to suggest this. The first is that one of the things that Constantin Valdor, as the King in Yellow, is quite obsessed with, we know, is Enuncia. Enuncia is the language of the universe, and it is, just even utter it will kill a lot of people. It's incredibly powerful, and one word of Enuncia from John Grammaticus dealt a substantial blow to Horus Lupercal, who is basically one below God at that point in the fight. So it's a very powerful language, and Constantin Valdor has been trying to understand more about it. It's been suggested to the Inquisition that maybe the King in Yellow, before they know it's Valdor, is trying to learn the true name of the Emperor to control him. And maybe he is, in some way, trying to learn the true name of the Emperor. But maybe the reason for that is more in the realm of he needs the name of the Emperor for some plan he's got in order to fix the Golden Throne. So you can't not bring up Valdor if you're going to have a wild 40k theory session. I thought it had to be done. My apologies. But we all love Valdor, and he's got to be doing something, right? if Dan Abnett, writes the third Beckwin novel and just writes about how, Valdor's just been chilling for 10,000 years and just liked experimenting on the Blood Angels because, I don't know, he just kind of got bored. That would be a bit of a shock. So I'd like to think that Valdor's doing something pretty big. The only one who can save the Emperor is Dan Abnett. I mean, I certainly think it's Dan Abnett or Chris Wright. That's the other thing about Valdor, is that although the King in Yellow is Dan Abnett's domain, Valdor, Birth of the Imperium, which is a book everybody should read if you've never read it. Well, actually, all of Chris Wright's books are pretty good, to be fair. That book is written by Chris Wright. So Valdor's still within his wheelhouse, and it wouldn't surprise me to see that crossover. And in actual fact, if they're not going to bring the King in Yellow back properly for like another time, having him return in story, just for like, a few chapters to help the Inquisition or whatever, that would make a lot of sense. And certainly I think it's pretty likely that the Custodians are going to be involved in trying to save the Golden Throne, because the Salvus Gorgias is the only person of like the Inquisitor's retinue to like survive the battle against the Drukhari, and he makes it back out of the webway onto this random planet. Of course, no idea where he is, and he's just like emitting this message that, of what's happened, that the Imperium is under threat, the Golden Throne is going to fail. However, the recent codexes from the Adeptus Custodes do suggest that they're aware of the Golden Throne failing, and so no doubt they're going to try and they'll be working together on this one. Interesting battle seems ironic that he needs all the Dark Age tech, wouldn't use AI to extend his influence, considering he's obviously not powerful enough without the tech. Assume you're still talking about the Emperor. So, yes, I mean, the problem is the Emperor sustains the throne, but the throne is also sort of sustaining the Emperor, according to Dan Abnett's writing. So it's sort of a weird one. So whether he would survive without the tech, I think he is not entirely clear, to be honest, because he is needed to power the throne. But if the throne's also needed to power you, then in theory you die if you want on the throne. But yeah, it's a really. Yeah, that's a really open to your interpretation, I'll be honest. Whatever you want to believe. You're all fools. Clearly, John Grammaticus will come back and save everything. Absolutely. I mean, I do wonder whether we'll see John Grammaticus again, because I don't think they have to give us a chapter of John Grammaticus dying, because it's very much kind of just left open that he's going to do this task for the rest of his life, and then he will die. But yeah, I mean, in theory, it would be cool to see that chapter kind of round off, but I don't think they'd have to. I think they could just sort of leave. They could sort of just leave the book where it is. Can Ghost Ferrus Manus materialize and fix the throne? That's a cool question. I don't think so. I mean, well, it's tough. The nature of what ghosts are in 40k is a tough thing to pin down, but in theory, actually, yeah, maybe that's possible, because the warp is spinning into reality far more. It wouldn't surprise me that now is the time we see the Iron Warriors getting a vision of like Ghost Ferrus Manus, just as Sanguinius got one on the Vengeful Spirit. So yeah, that might make sense, but whether he could sort of like give them enough information to fix the Golden Throne, I doubt, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's a part of it. Yeah, it's a cool theory. I do like it. Okay. I will talk briefly about Belisarius Cawl, because of course Belisarius Cawl of the Adeptus Mechanicus is someone that you might bring up in this conversation as someone who would have the capability to fix the Golden Throne of Terra. And the reason you would think that is because he can basically fix anything in Warhammer 40k, it seems. So he has been tasked by Guilliman to close the Great Rift. He has been according to him, he is able to basically reverse a lot of the damage that Tyranids do to planets. It will take a long period of time, but he can basically reverse the damage of the Tyranids absorbing the biomatter of the planet. So he has tremendous capabilities. Of course, he created the Primarius Marines. He has kind of the sort of the ultimate cloning technology, really, within the Imperium, as it were, because he's not just Belisarius Cawl. He's all of these people throughout history. Even the Emperor, it said in his Belisarius Cawl, The Great Work, that's kind of given him kind of the go-ahead to do crazy stuff. And so Belisarius Cawl has knowledge far beyond pretty much anyone else within the Adeptus Mechanicus, as far as we know. But because he has this fractious relationship with Raskian, it seems likely to me that Raskian would never tell Belisarius Cawl about what's going on with the Golden Throne. And to be honest, narratively, Cawl has his fingers in so many pies. I've spoken about kind of his plan to time travel in the future of Warhammer 40k, which I do expect to happen. Yeah, because he's got his fingers in all these pies, I don't think he's going to be pulled into this storyline either, and as well, I should say. And so, yeah, I think Belisarius Cawl is going to be largely out of the question. But to be fair, if your brain immediately jumps to Belisarius Cawl, I can't really knock you. It's pretty fair guess, as it were. I liked the bit in Gene Father where Bile and Cawl basically shit talk each other's science. Yes, I mean, well, to be fair to that was one part of the book that I really liked, where, of course, Fabius Bile doesn't kill Alpha Primus, despite the fact that maybe it would have been easier for him to do so, and Cawl certainly fears that Bile will kill his greatest servant / son. And Bile says that he's not going to kill Alpha Primus, despite the fact he pretty much hates everything Space Marine, because Alpha Primus is such a kind of a beautiful creation from Fabius Bile's point of view. In terms of a genetic marvel, he is incredible. And so, yeah, it's kind of funny there. I like that bit in the book. Morning from Australia. Hey, wishing you the biggest of brain days. I mean, I've already forgot like 4 names this stream, so thank you. I need the wishing of luck there. He hasn't really done any headway in fixing the rift, though. He's waiting to convince the Necron Cryptek for help. So I think he is still hoping to fix the Necron Cryptek. But, I mean, Gene Father was only 2 years ago, which is not very long in 40k novel terms. And in that novel, he has his, you know, trial, as it were. He's sort of put on trial in front of these members of the Adeptus Mechanicus. And he not only survives the trial, but he basically convinces a bunch of the other Magoses into joining him in this plan to, I always say time travel, but then the chat always corrects me, used temporal displacement to travel to this planet that was destroyed or is being destroyed by a black hole. And if he can get to that, in theory, he could get the knowledge to close the Great Rift. So he's actually made pretty good headway, according, I will say. He does talk in the book about how he is able to use Necron pylons. He understands that technology, I think it is. But I think it's, I have to remember the wording, but I think it's quite specific in that whilst he can utilize a Necron pylon, he can't make large networks of Necron pylons. And you need a network that's going to cross the galaxy, pretty much. So that's the final knowledge that Belisarius Cawl needs. And if he can do that, and in theory, he could close the Great Rift. But I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Of course, it's been narratively very useful for Games Workshop. I think that, you know, they wouldn't be putting all these campaign books out about the Nachman Gauntlet and Vigilus if they were just going to close the Great Rift. But yeah, I guess we'll see. Well, one day. So that's it for this live stream. Let me know in the comments if you think the Emperor of Mankind can be saved. Do you think the Golden Throne is just doomed? Do you think 40k has this, you know, at this point, 150 year, maybe 100 year time limit, and then the setting is just over? Because since that conversation with Udi Araskian, you know, about 100 years has passed at the peak, depending on how you read Games Workshop's retcons. And so there's, you know, potentially the Emperor has very little time left. Do you think that's the official end date of Warhammer 40k? Or do you think someone's going to come in and save the Golden Throne, thereby saving not just the Emperor, but the entire Imperium and likely all of humanity? So, yeah, let me know what you guys think. Do you think I'm completely overgassing Vulkan? Do you think the Votann stand no chance? Or do you think there's anyone I've missed? Who else do you think would have not just the ability, but the inclination, the willfulness to actually save the Master of Mankind, save the Imperium? Are there any more rather dangerous alliances that the Imperium could enter and hopefully save the Master of Mankind? Let me know in the comments. Love to read it. But thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
And that's a wrap for today's stream. If you enjoy these kinds of Warhammer 40k lore breakdowns and discussions, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you don't miss me going live. For those of you who want extra content and to support the channel, consider clicking the join button. Becoming a member will give you access to more videos and streams and our Discord community, where you can chat with other lore enthusiasts and myself. Thanks again for watching, look out for any Chaos or Genestealer cults in your area, and I'll see you next time.